A restless energy filled Chicago's O'Hare International Airport as the boarding call for Flight 847 rang out over the loudspeaker. The sound distorted just enough by static to be annoying, but clear enough to trigger a surge of movement in the crowded terminal. It was late, the flight was delayed, and every face in the waiting area showed some combination of fatigue, impatience, and resignation. Even among the crowd, Zara Williams stood out for her quiet stillness, her composure like a stone at the center of a current. She glanced once more at her boarding pass, then rose and joined the flow, her carry-on in hand. The storm outside had stranded planes and passengers alike, making every interaction in the terminal feel more brittle, more charged. People glanced at one another, half wondering who to blame for the inconvenience. Security guards leaned against walls, their radios crackling with updates that never seemed to bring good news. As the line moved toward the gate, Zara maintained a measured pace. Her carry-on was sleek and unremarkable, the kind sold in every department store, but as she stepped forward, she felt the weight shift, a familiar reminder of the equipment inside. She had packed carefully, aware that every item had a purpose and a place. Her face was calm, her posture relaxed. She had learned long ago not to give anyone an easy excuse to scrutinize her. The gate agent, Jessica Miller, offered a quick smile to the passenger ahead, then took Zara's boarding pass. Her gaze lingered on the name for a split second longer than necessary before she scanned the document. There was a subtle shift in her demeanor, nothing that could be called out, nothing actionable, just a momentary tightening around her mouth. Jessica returned the pass, wished Zara a safe flight, and signaled the next person forward. Zara felt the glance, the moment of calculation, but brushed it aside. She had trained herself to ignore such things unless and until they became relevant. She walked down the jetway, stepping into the familiar choreography of airline travel, the forced cheer of flight attendants, the jostling for space in the aisle. At row 12, Zara paused and reached for the overhead bin, her bag held by both handles. Just as she began to lift it, a male attendant, Brian Carter, older, his expression a practiced neutrality, appeared beside her. "Can I help with that?" he asked, voice pitched to be friendly but with a hint of inspection underneath. "No, thank you. I've got it," Zara replied, matching his tone, her grip steady. Brian watched as she stowed the bag, noting how she moved, precise, unhurried, controlled. He glanced at the bag, then at her face, then back again. Something about the scene triggered his sense of duty, or maybe just his sense of power. "Ma'am, airline regulations require us to check bags that appear overweight. Can you take it down again so I can verify?" he asked, volume just loud enough for passengers nearby to hear. Zara didn't flinch. "It fits within size and weight requirements. I'd prefer to keep it up there." Brian's smile faded. He motioned to Jessica at the front. Jessica approached, the atmosphere growing heavier with every step. Other passengers paused, shifting in their seats, sensing something out of the ordinary. Jessica's voice was sharper this time. "Is there a problem here?" Brian nodded at the overhead. "This passenger is refusing to let us inspect her bag." Zara felt every eye on her. She had a choice, stand her ground or comply. She straightened, kept her voice even. "I haven't refused. I just stated the bag meets your guidelines." Now the situation was out of her hands. The crew had made their decision, and escalation was inevitable. Captain David Mitchell emerged from the cockpit, drawn by the tension and the cluster of voices. He asked what was happening, listened to Brian's account, then faced Zara directly. His tone was both polite and firm, the tone of a man used to being obeyed. "Ma'am, I need you to cooperate with my crew's request. It's a safety issue." Zara nodded, her jaw tight. "Very well," she said, and carefully pulled the bag back down. She placed it in the aisle, her hands never leaving the handles. Brian reached for the zipper. Zara stopped him, not forcefully, just a hand on his arm. "I'd prefer to open it myself," she said, her eyes steady on his. Passengers now whispered openly, Someone a few rows back started filming with a phone. Jessica, arms crossed, raised her voice. "Ma'am, you need to step back and let us inspect your luggage." Zara scanned the faces around her, the crew, the passengers, the captain. Every detail registered, where people stood, who looked afraid, who looked angry, who looked ready to intervene. She had cataloged these dynamics countless times. "If this is about safety, I suggest you call airport security," she said quietly. Brian and Jessica exchanged glances. The decision was made. Captain Mitchell radioed ground control, requesting security. The plane was no longer a closed system. It had become a stage, every move now magnified. Within minutes, uniformed officers appeared, led by Officer Thompson, thick-set, direct, and his partner, Officer Parker, sharp-eyed and younger. They asked for a summary, then turned to Zara. "Step away from the bag and move to the front of the plane," Officer Thompson instructed. Zara complied, her movements unhurried. She could feel the passengers' stares, the whispered commentary, the tap of fingers on phone screens. "What's in the bag?" Officer Parker asked. "Personal items," Zara replied. "We need to be more specific," Thompson pressed. "Given the circumstances, we're searching your belongings." Zara met his gaze. "Then I request the presence of federal authorities." This gave both officers pause. Parker in particular recognized the request for what it was, not a threat, but an invocation of a different set of rules. "Why the FBI?" Thompson asked. "Because this situation is more complex than you realize," Zara answered, tone never rising. A fresh wave of whispers ran through the plane. The captain grew impatient. "Officers, are we dealing with a threat?" Officer Thompson made the call. The flight was empty, passengers complaining, crew trying to keep order. The plane became a bubble of suspicion and anxiety. Once the cabin was cleared, the search began. Zara stood off to the side, observing as gloves were donned, zippers pulled. The contents of her bag drew startled looks. Communications gear, unfamiliar tablets, equipment that was neither obviously illegal nor easily explained. Thompson turned to Zara. "What is all this?" She stayed silent. Jessica and Brian watched from a distance, a mixture of vindication and discomfort on their faces. "Call the bomb squad and the feds," Thompson radioed. Minutes later, the gate area was swarmed by new arrivals, FBI, bomb techs, and airport brass. An agent with the bearing of experience, Rebecca Stone, took over. Her questions were measured, her eyes assessing. She asked Zara to produce identification. Zara did, carefully. Stone examined the ID, then made a call. After a brief, coded conversation, she returned and nodded to her team. The mood shifted. Stone spoke quietly to Captain Mitchell, the officers, and the crew. The equipment was cleared. The bag was closed. The tension, however, didn't dissipate. Passengers were let back in. The crew, faces stiff with uncertainty, reset the plane for flight. Zara boarded, her calm never wavering, but a current of exhaustion running under her skin. As the plane finally lifted off, order seemed restored. But the air was thick with unresolved questions. Passengers whispered about what they'd seen. Crew members replayed the incident in their minds, searching for justification. Zara sat at her window, her mind already moving through the steps she would have to take to control the aftermath. Long before that moment in the aisle, Zara Williams had been shaped by experiences that taught her caution, resilience, and the cost of standing out in spaces where she was never assumed to belong. Her earliest memories were of her mother, a nurse, coming home exhausted but determined. Her father, a teacher, urging her to keep her head high and her records clean. They taught her that excellence would not always shield her, but it was the first defense. From childhood, Zara noticed the small ways the world demanded explanations from her that it never seemed to require from others. At school, her hand had to be twice as high, her answers twice as precise. On the basketball court, she learned to channel frustration into focus, to use her physicality not as a threat but as proof of control. Academically, she was a prodigy, math, languages, and the logic of puzzles. She skipped grades, navigated scholarships, and entered college early. She found herself drawn to systems, how rules were made and broken, how organizations decided who belonged. Law school was a natural progression, but the call of public service was stronger. She joined a federal agency straight out of grad school, quickly recognized for her poise under fire and her meticulous, methodical approach to every case. Her work took her across the country and overseas. She became adept at traveling light, thinking on her feet, and blending in without ever truly disappearing. She learned how to talk to anyone, how to read a room, how to move from background to center stage at a moment's notice. The discipline she honed in youth became her greatest asset. But even in government service, she noticed how suspicion seemed to settle more easily on her shoulders. In airports, she became an expert at the dance of compliance, never rushing, never bristling at questions, never giving anyone an excuse to escalate. She was careful with her words, never raised her voice, never rolled her eyes. It was not always enough. She packed her bags with precision, never anything that would trigger a secondary check, always paperwork in order, always an answer ready. But on this particular night in Chicago, she carried equipment that could not be explained away, a necessity for her assignment, but a liability if misunderstood. She expected the occasional inconvenience. She did not expect the speed with which ordinary procedures would spin into confrontation, nor the way her calm would be read as a provocation. She felt the shift the moment she approached the gate, the calculation in Jessica's eyes, the preemptive defensiveness in Brian's posture. When the situation escalated, her training kicked in. She knew not to argue, not to plead, not to protest too loudly. She did not want to be a martyr or a viral video. She wanted to finish her assignment and return home. But she also knew that for people like her, every public moment carried a second, secret audience. Every interaction was a test, every outcome a precedent. After the incident, as the plane crossed the country, Zara considered what had happened. She replayed each step, each word, searching for any miscalculation on her part. She found none. She wondered what would come next, whether she would be pulled from her assignment, whether her agency would support her, whether she would become just another footnote in the long record of misunderstood intentions. The storm in Chicago had delayed her departure, but the real turbulence was only beginning. Social media posts by other passengers, blurry videos, and hurried commentary were already spreading. Her face might soon be everywhere. She would have to navigate the consequences as carefully as she had navigated the original confrontation. What the crew saw as suspicious, her agency would see as standard protocol. What the officers saw as unusual behavior, her colleagues would recognize as professional discipline. But none of that would be visible to the passengers or the public or the countless others who would see only what they expected to see. Zara took comfort in her resilience, in the lessons her family had instilled, in the systems she had mastered. But she also understood that the burden should never have been hers alone. As the city lights of Los Angeles appeared outside her window, she promised herself that whatever came next, she would stand her ground, not just for herself, but for every traveler who was told in 1,000 small ways that they did not quite belong. The wait at gate B-23 stretched on, feeding rumors and resentment. Passengers milled around, voices merging into a restless buzz, eyes darting to phones for updates that never seemed to come. Some texted family about the delay, others posted short videos of the earlier commotion, eager to be first with a story. News traveled quickly, one moment an incident, the next a trending hashtag. Inside, Zara Williams stood near the edge of the crowd, her expression unchanged. Strangers studied her openly, trying to fit her into the story they'd already told themselves. Some glared, convinced she was the reason they might miss connections or family reunions in Los Angeles. Others eyed her with curiosity or even sympathy, reading something unjust in the way the officers had surrounded her. Over the intercom, an announcement. Flight 847 would begin reboarding shortly. A collective groan swept through the terminal, but people lined up just the same, driven by exhaustion more than hope. Zara watched their faces as they moved past her, cataloging suspicion, annoyance, and the occasional spark of kindness. Tyrone Johnson lingered near the back of the line, eyes searching for her. When their gazes met, he gave her a nod that said he remembered everything. Jessica Miller scanned boarding passes with the brisk detachment of someone determined not to let emotion show. When Zara approached, Jessica's smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Their hands brushed for a second as Jessica returned the pass, an awkward, accidental touch that left both women looking elsewhere. Further down the jetway, Captain Mitchell greeted passengers with steady politeness. As Zara passed, he leaned in, lowering his voice just enough. "Thank you for your patience, Miss Williams. My crew acted with the best intentions." Zara met his eyes, reading concern and fatigue. "I understand, Captain. Passenger safety comes first." He nodded, reassured, but worry lingered on his face as she continued toward the plane. Inside, the cabin felt smaller than before. Whispers swirled between rows as travelers filled seats, some peering over seat backs to confirm that, yes, the woman from the earlier drama was back among them. The tension buzzed beneath the surface, surfacing in clipped conversations and the click of phone cameras held low. Zara claimed her seat, sliding her bag into the overhead compartment with deliberate care. This time, no one challenged her. A new attendant named Dorothy approached, her tone warm and without suspicion. "Can I help with that?" "I'm fine, thank you," Zara replied. Dorothy smiled and moved on, offering drinks and reassurance in equal measure. The difference was stark, her service unburdened by fear, her kindness extended to every passenger. Across the aisle, Tyrone watched, arms folded, eyes alert for any sign of trouble. When the line thinned and most were buckled in, he leaned over. "Everything good now?" "It will be," Zara answered. "Thank you for checking in. People shouldn't have to go through what you did." Tyrone kept his voice low. "If you need someone to talk to, I've got experience." Zara gave him a small, grateful smile, then turned her attention to the window. Outside, runway lights shimmered on rain-soaked concrete, the city looming in the distance. As the plane taxied, Dorothy offered a drink. "Water, please, no ice," Zara requested. Dorothy's nod was friendly, no trace of the guarded formality Jessica had shown. "Long day?" Dorothy said softly, not prying, simply acknowledging. "It's been eventful," Zara admitted. From behind, a young woman in a UCLA sweatshirt spoke up. "Hey, were you the one they stopped earlier?" Zara hesitated, measuring her words. "Yes, I was questioned." The student's face reflected concern. "That looked intense. I saw some videos. Sorry, people were so nosy." "These things happen," Zara replied. Passengers nearby glanced up, some nodding in agreement, others frowning, wanting more information. Zara kept her answers short, unwilling to feed the rumor mill. Overhead, the chime signaled final preparations for takeoff. Captain Mitchell's voice broke in, his apology carefully worded. "Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your patience. Security issues delayed our departure, but all procedures are complete. We expect a smooth flight to Los Angeles." Relief rippled through the cabin, though tension remained. Conversation ebbed and flowed, alternating between gossip about the incident and the usual complaints about airline food and crowded seating. During the climb, Zara settled back, mind turning to her mission. Her phone, encrypted and nondescript, vibrated in her pocket. The message was simple. Mission status unchanged. Proceed as briefed. Contact in LA confirmed. Across the aisle, Tyrone watched her, piecing together what little he'd seen and heard. He noticed the way she shielded her phone from view, the calm with which she read and then deleted the message. The beverage cart rattled up and down the aisle. Dorothy offered a smile and a cup of water. "Here you go. Let me know if you need anything." Zara nodded, grateful for the normalcy. Further back, conversations returned to mundane topics. One man grumbled about lost luggage. A mother soothed a crying child. Yet every so often, the conversation drifted back to Zara, the mysterious woman, the heavy bag, the police, and the bomb squad. Jessica moved quietly among the rows, eyes flicking toward Zara every so often. She'd received only a vague briefing from Captain Mitchell. Passenger cleared by federal authorities. Treat as normal. But normal felt impossible. At the back of the plane, Brian Carter nursed a cup of coffee, replaying every moment of the earlier confrontation. He remembered the firmness in Zara's voice, the way she seemed to anticipate every move. He wanted to feel vindicated by the bomb squad's arrival, but found only confusion. As the flight progressed, small acts of solidarity emerged. An older woman in a gray sweater caught Zara's eye and nodded once, slowly. The student in the sweatshirt offered gum. Even the businessman who'd earlier glared in irritation now seemed to soften, asking if she needed the aisle for a stretch. Yet not every response was friendly. 2 rows ahead, a pair of frequent flyers muttered about security theater and people causing trouble. Their glances toward Zara carried the old, familiar weight of judgment. Dorothy made her way through the cabin, delivering snacks and gentle encouragement to the anxious. She paused beside Zara's row once more. "Let me know if you'd like a blanket. Some nights are colder than others." "Thank you, Dorothy. You're very kind," Zara said. Dorothy paused, understanding in her gaze. "We all have hard days," she replied quietly. At 30,000 feet, the plane settled into its rhythm, engines humming in the dark. Zara reviewed encrypted files on her tablet, memorizing details for meetings to come. The incident at O'Hare replayed in her mind, every word and glance cataloged for her eventual report. Her training demanded it, nothing overlooked, every variable considered. Tyrone, across the aisle, scribbled in a legal pad, notes from a case he'd been preparing, but his mind kept circling back to the events at the gate. He recognized the pattern, a black traveler, calm but scrutinized, forced to justify her existence to authority figures primed to see a threat. The difference here was the ending. Federal clearance, not handcuffs or humiliation. The plane hit turbulence. Some passengers gasped, clutching armrests. Zara hardly blinked, her mind always a step ahead, rehearsing emergency protocols even as she stared out at the scattered lights below. Halfway through the flight, Dorothy returned. "Still good?" Zara smiled. "Yes, thank you." Dorothy lowered her voice. "You handled yourself well earlier. Not everyone could have done that." "It comes with practice," Zara answered, her tone neutral but not unfriendly. "Let me know if you need anything," Dorothy repeated. In the row behind, the UCLA student whispered to her seatmate, "She's so calm. I'd be freaking out." Her companion replied, "Yeah, but you can tell she's been through worse. People like that, you don't mess with them." Over the intercom, Captain Mitchell announced favorable winds and an earlier-than-expected arrival. Relief surged through the cabin, though some passengers grumbled that nothing could make up for the delay. As the city lights of Los Angeles appeared on the horizon, Zara's phone buzzed again. Another secure message, this one with logistical details for her first meeting in the city. Her cover, business consultant, arriving on short notice, resume carefully scrubbed of specifics, remained intact, but the extra scrutiny from O'Hare could not be undone. As the plane began its descent, Dorothy offered a final round of drinks. "Almost there. Anything I can get you?" "Nothing more, thank you." Dorothy smiled. "Hope the rest of your trip is easier." Passengers prepared for landing, gathering bags and stretching legs. Some eyed Zara, wondering if she'd be met by more law enforcement at LAX, while others simply wanted the journey to end. The wheels hit the runway, jarring a few dozing travelers awake. The familiar announcements, seatbelts, carry-ons, and safety reminders rolled out, almost lost in the rush of passengers ready to escape. Zara waited, letting the impatient surge past. Tyrone lingered at the row, card in hand. "If you need anything, I mean it," he said. "Legal advice, statement, whatever." Zara accepted the card, recognizing the name of a respected civil rights firm in Chicago. "Thank you, Tyrone. I hope it won't come to that, but I appreciate it." He nodded, stepping into the aisle, joining the crowd. As Zara retrieved her bag, she felt the weight of 100 silent questions pressing down. Some wanted to congratulate her for handling herself. Others wanted to blame her for the inconvenience, and still others simply wanted to know what had really happened. Captain Mitchell stood at the cockpit door, his tone measured. "Miss Williams, safe travels. Let us know if you have any trouble collecting your luggage." Zara nodded, meeting his gaze. "Thank you, Captain. I appreciate your professionalism." He watched her go, the burden of command heavy on his shoulders. In the jetway, Zara paused, checking her phone. More secure messages, more instructions. The incident at O'Hare had already been noted in headquarters, her report requested within 24 hours. She composed a quick reply. Status green. Mission on track. Debrief after LA meetings. Down in baggage claim, the mood was lighter. Luggage carts rattled, children reunited with parents, travelers checked watches and groaned at the late hour. Tyrone appeared, offering another nod before heading toward the exit. Zara's suitcase arrived, unmolested. She moved through the crowd, scanning for anyone paying too much attention, aware that even now some might try to follow or question her. Outside, she hailed a taxi, preferring its anonymity to the tracked convenience of ride shares. The driver, an older man with tired eyes, asked about her trip. "Long day?" he guessed. "Longer than planned," Zara answered. He nodded, not pushing for more. The drive through midnight Los Angeles was a blur of neon signs and taillights. Zara's mind ran through her plan, every contact and appointment reviewed for security. At the hotel, the desk clerk handed over a key. "Welcome, Ms. Williams. Elevators to your right." In her room, she locked the door, ran a sweep for listening devices, and unpacked only what she needed. Her phone buzzed with a final message of the night. "Media reports increasing. Stay low." She responded, "Acknowledged. Mission will adapt." Across the city, Amanda Washington, investigative journalist, scrolled through social media reports and news stories about the O'Hare profiling case. She noted how the narrative shifted with each retelling, sometimes focusing on security, other times on race, always lacking the details that would make sense of it all. Amanda reached out to Tyrone, arranging a call to discuss what he had witnessed. His account added a layer of detail and emotion missing from official reports, especially the way Zara had handled herself. Meanwhile, back in Chicago, the ripple effects of the incident continued to grow. Chief Marcus Davis reviewed video footage, taking notes on every decision made by airport and airline staff. He saw the shift from routine to suspicion to escalation and wondered what he could have done differently. Keisha Brooks, his assistant, provided files on every officer involved. "FBI wants a full debrief tomorrow," she said. "Tell them I'll be ready," Marcus replied. "We're going to get to the bottom of this." At the same time, Agent Stone filed her report to the FBI field office, emphasizing the need for revised protocols when classified personnel travel undercover. Her supervisor, Special Agent Robert Mitchell, called for a review of how intelligence operations intersect with local law enforcement. Within the airline, a different kind of reckoning was underway. Jessica Miller and Brian Carter sat through debriefs with safety officials, recounting every moment. "We followed procedures," Jessica insisted, voice tight. But she was so calm. "No one's that calm unless they're hiding something." Brian nodded. "And that bag, no regular person travels with that kind of equipment." The safety officer made notes, not committing to either side. Dorothy, in contrast, described Zara as polite, professional, no trouble at all. Her view, at odds with the others, prompted a quiet debate among the crew. Some sided with her, others with Brian and Jessica. Captain Mitchell reviewed the evening with the airline's head of safety. "We did what we were trained to do," he said. "But it feels like we missed something. She was never a threat. We made her one." The official asked, "How would you handle it now?" Mitchell replied, "I'd ask more questions. I'd look for evidence, not just suspicion." Back in LA, Zara met with her handler in a nondescript office, handing over her encrypted device. "O'Hare incident is being handled," she reported, "but increased scrutiny may impact future missions." "Mission still active," the handler confirmed. "We'll adjust." Your composure under pressure was noted by several agencies. Later, at a coffee shop downtown, Zara's contact, a financial analyst working undercover, recognized her from social media posts. "Was that you at O'Hare?" he whispered. Zara's answer was simple. "Travel delays, nothing to worry about." He nodded, impressed by her poise. "The city's buzzing about it, be careful." The next morning, news stories began to appear on national outlets. Incident at O'Hare raises questions about security protocols. Passenger cleared after bag search delays hundreds. In the comments, readers debated what had really happened, some blaming security for overreach, others blaming the passenger for not complying quickly enough. Civil rights groups issued statements demanding investigations into racial profiling at airports. Tyrone, reading the headlines, felt a surge of both anger and vindication. He sent Zara a text, offering to speak publicly if it would help. She replied, "Thank you, but not yet. Mission comes first." At O'Hare, Chief Davis implemented mandatory bias training for all personnel. Officers and crew sat through sessions on de-escalation, cultural awareness, and evidence-based protocols. Officer Lisa Parker found herself wrestling with doubt. She replayed her actions over and over, wondering if she'd reacted to Zara's calm as a threat because it didn't fit her expectations. One night, she spoke to her partner, Thompson. "Do you ever think we see what we want to see, not what's really there?" He shrugged, unwilling to second-guess. "We followed the rules. That's what matters." But Parker wasn't satisfied. "If the rules let us get it wrong, maybe the rules need to change." Jessica and Brian in a break room replayed the events as well. "We did our jobs," Brian said, "but it still feels off." Jessica sipped her coffee. "What if we were wrong? What if our training isn't enough?" Dorothy, passing by, shook her head. "Sometimes people are calm because they have nothing to hide." The airline's crisis team met daily, debating what to tell the public. Beverly Thompson, head of customer relations, argued for transparency and reform. "If we admit mistakes and promise to do better, people will trust us more." Legal counsel urged caution. "We can't share details about classified passengers." Beverly replied, "Then share our commitment to change." Meanwhile, Jonathan Davis, a civil rights attorney, reviewed every detail. "Discriminatory intent is hard to prove," he told his team, "but the pattern is there. We need to push for systematic reform, not just blame individuals." Amanda Washington finished her article, careful to include every voice: passengers, crew, police, airline officials, civil rights advocates. She described how suspicion spiraled, how training sometimes failed, how a calm, competent woman became a target simply by refusing to be rattled. Her story made waves. TV crews descended on O'Hare. Lawmakers called for hearings. The hashtags multiplied. Back in LA, Zara prepared for another day's work, her mission unchanged, but her awareness sharpened. She knew her story was bigger than herself now, a catalyst for conversations about security, race, professionalism, and the need for reform. As she left her hotel, she received a message from headquarters. "You've become a case study. Prepare for follow-up." Zara slipped into the rhythm of her new city, blending into meetings, gathering intelligence, her composure unbroken. But the memory of O'Hare lingered, a reminder that in America, the intersection of identity and authority could never be taken for granted. She passed through crowds in LA as she had in Chicago, her presence both invisible and unforgettable. Every interaction, every glance, every word, carefully measured, carefully stored. In her report, she wrote, "The incident revealed more about our systems than about me. Our work is never just about threats. It's about the values we protect and the biases we must confront." She sent the report and moved on. But the world had changed, if only by a little, because she'd stood her ground and refused to be diminished. Chicago's morning haze hung low over the airport, softening the concrete harshness that had defined the night before. Inside the O'Hare administrative offices, Chief Marcus Davis sat behind his desk, the blue glare of security footage replaying every step of the incident with relentless precision. A stack of reports grew by the hour: officer statements, passenger complaints, airline memos. He had faced angry crowds, lost children, and bomb threats, but this incident carried an aftertaste he couldn't shake. Marcus adjusted his glasses, pausing the video at the moment Zara calmly faced down the two police officers. Her eyes, cool and measured, suggested experience with authority far beyond most travelers. He rewound, watching again the way Brian Carter's suspicion had flared and spread, how Jessica Miller's smile had faltered, how Captain Mitchell's sense of duty had edged toward overcaution. He saw the way passengers leaned in, some eager for drama, some for justice. His assistant, Keisha Brooks, entered quietly. FBI scheduled their debrief for 11. Agent Stone asked for all body cam and terminal footage. Marcus nodded. Have legal flag anything with clear passenger ID, no leaks until we know what's sensitive. Keisha set a new stack of emails on his desk. Dozens of passengers want statements for the news. Some say it was racial profiling. Civil rights groups are calling for your response. Make sure they know we're reviewing everything. No comment until after the debrief. As Keisha left, Marcus returned to the report. He made careful notes, how quickly the confrontation escalated, the words used, the nervous laughter, the way calmness itself seemed to be read as defiance. He flagged the precise moment the request for FBI involvement changed the temperature in the room. Meanwhile, Jessica Miller and Brian Carter waited in the break room, reviewing the morning's news coverage on a muted TV. Jessica scrolled through social media, biting her lip as hashtags multiplied. Passengers had shared footage of the incident, some stories focused on safety, others on injustice. Her own name, mentioned only in passing, was enough to send a shiver down her spine. I did what I was supposed to do, Jessica said, her voice quiet. Why does it feel like I did something wrong? Brian stared at his coffee, hands wrapped tightly around the cup. She was too calm. People who aren't hiding something don't act like that. He glanced at Jessica, hoping for agreement. Dorothy entered, tucking stray hair behind her ear. Or maybe she was calm because she's used to people expecting the worst. Jessica looked away. Brian just frowned. In a conference room upstairs, Captain Mitchell reviewed his own account with a safety official from the airline. We followed the handbook. Crew reports suspicious behavior. The captain escalates as needed. We had no way to know who she really was. The official tapped at his tablet. The outcome was safe. No passengers harmed, but public reaction is strong. The board wants recommendations for future incidents. Captain Mitchell hesitated. We need better tools for discretion, maybe a direct line to federal liaisons. The official nodded, typing notes. We're drafting new guidance now. This will go into training. Jessica and Brian were called in one at a time. Their interviews were lengthy and exhausting. Describe her behavior. At what point did you feel threatened? Did you notice her race before or after you felt something was wrong? Jessica shifted in her seat. It wasn't about race. She just didn't react how I expected. It made me nervous. Brian was more defensive. It was procedure. Her bag was too heavy. She didn't want to open it. That's what started it. When Dorothy's turn came, her responses were different. She answered politely. She followed instructions. She didn't escalate. We did. Outside the airline's offices, protests grew. A group held signs reading, "Traveling while black isn't a crime," and "Fairness, not fear." Reporters jockeyed for interviews with any employee willing to comment. Social media exploded with video clips, some shaky, some clear, all carrying their own narrative. In Los Angeles, Zara woke early, her body still tuned to Midwest time. The sunlight slanted through the curtains, painting stripes across her hotel room. She brewed coffee, reviewed encrypted messages, and made a mental list of contacts and appointments. The O'Hare incident had already begun to ripple through her world, colleagues reaching out with concern or praise. One message from her handler: HQ monitoring situation. Your composure noted. She replied, mission unaffected, media interest high, maintaining low profile. Her first meeting was with a source at a law firm in downtown LA, an informant who handled financial records for several international clients. Zara dressed carefully, neutral tones, nothing flashy, her badge and secure devices hidden away. In the lobby, she was just another business traveler, a role she played so well no one looked twice. Over lunch, her contact hesitated before mentioning the news. Saw the O'Hare story online. You're not the only one it's happened to. Zara nodded, keeping her answer measured. Travel's unpredictable. I adapt. Afterward, she walked back to her hotel, fielding a call from Agent Stone. The internal reviews are ongoing, Stone said. Your identity is protected, but pressure is mounting. Several agencies want lessons learned from this. Zara kept her voice steady. I'll submit a full report. Recommend cross-training for law enforcement and federal travelers. Understood. If the media asks, maintain your cover story. I will. As she hung up, Zara reflected on how the public nature of the incident had complicated her assignment. Every meeting, every introduction now came with a silent calculation. Was she being watched? Were others connecting her face to those blurry images from the airport? The media story grew with every passing hour. Amanda Washington, a reporter known for her incisive investigations, worked late into the night, piecing together timelines, contacting witnesses, and requesting comment from the airline and Chicago authorities. Amanda's desk was littered with notes, quotes from passengers, statements from advocacy groups, copies of airline procedures. She studied the details with a forensic eye. She called Tyrone Johnson, who provided a first-hand account. The whole thing was avoidable, Tyrone said. She was calm, never raised her voice. But they saw a threat where there wasn't one. That's what bias looks like. Amanda typed as he spoke, her focus intense. Would you testify to that publicly? In a heartbeat, someone needs to say it. Later, Amanda spoke with legal experts, civil rights attorneys, and representatives from the National Bar Association. Each had a different take on what the incident revealed. Some blamed outdated protocols, others pointed to broader societal patterns. All agreed it was more than a simple misunderstanding. That evening, Zara sat in her room, watching the news cycle spin. On one network, a commentator argued for more security. On another, a civil rights activist denounced traveling while black. She sipped her coffee, calm but not unmoved. Every mention of her, even unnamed, threatened to pull her focus from the mission at hand. A secure message arrived. Mission contact at risk, adjust travel accordingly. She altered her route for the next meeting, choosing public transport over a hired car, changing her walking pattern to avoid being followed. The routines of espionage blended with the habits of Black Americans who have learned to be hyper-aware in public. The intersection of race, duty, and survival felt sharper than ever. Back in Chicago, the FBI's debrief was thorough. Agent Stone presented her findings. The crew followed written procedure but failed to assess risk independently. The police followed protocol, but their interpretation of Zara's calmness as suspicious raised concerns. Stone concluded, this was a failure of imagination and empathy. Training must reflect real-world diversity, not just checklists. Chief Davis agreed, outlining plans for updated de-escalation and bias training. We'll bring in outside consultants, real experts, not just videos and forms to sign. The airline's crisis team gathered in a conference room, facing angry calls from advocacy groups and nervous board members. Beverly Thompson spoke with conviction. We have to be honest. This is bigger than one passenger, one flight. We need real change or we'll lose public trust. A lawyer objected. If we admit wrongdoing, we open ourselves to lawsuits. Beverly replied, if we don't, we risk everything else. Within days, the airline announced new initiatives: mandatory bias recognition training, anonymous reporting for crew misconduct, and a liaison office for passengers who experience discrimination. The moves drew praise from some corners, skepticism from others. Jessica Miller and Brian Carter sat in the first training session, uncomfortable in chairs set in a half circle, facing a facilitator who challenged their assumptions. Think back to the incident, the facilitator said. When did you first feel uncomfortable? What did you see, hear, or feel that triggered it? Was it her behavior, her race, her calmness, her refusal to comply? Jessica hesitated. She was just different. She didn't get angry. I thought she would. The facilitator nodded. Different isn't dangerous. Unusual isn't unsafe. Brian bristled. What if it had been a threat? The facilitator's gaze didn't waver. You'd have followed protocol. But ask yourself, did you escalate because you were trained to or because you were afraid? Brian fell silent. Dorothy's voice rang out. I saw a passenger, that's all. Jessica studied her hands, a mixture of shame and uncertainty gnawing at her. She wondered how many other passengers she'd misread over the years. At police headquarters, Officer Lisa Parker sat at her desk long after her shift ended, reviewing training materials about implicit bias. Words like unconscious assumptions and procedural justice glowed on her screen. Her partner, Thompson, leaned in the doorway. You coming? In a minute. He shrugged, grabbing his coat. Parker opened a notebook, jotting down her thoughts. Why did I see her calmness as a problem? Would I have reacted the same way if she was white? What am I not seeing in myself? She resolved to bring these questions to her supervisor. If real change was possible, it would start with uncomfortable conversations. In Los Angeles, Zara's mission unfolded, but with every interaction, she carried the weight of the O'Hare incident. Her informant at the law firm passed her a thumb drive over coffee, their conversation shielded by the ambient noise of lunchtime crowds. He whispered, "People are talking about you. Some think you're a hero. Some say you got special treatment." Zara replied, "Everyone's entitled to an opinion." He watched her closely. "You ever get tired of it?" She answered, "Tired doesn't enter into it. You do the job you're given, then you move on." He handed over the drive, a subtle nod between professionals. "Be safe." As she walked back to her hotel, Zara's phone vibrated, a new message from her handler. "Your story is everywhere. The director wants a debrief when you're back." She deleted the message after reading, eyes always scanning the sidewalk. That evening, she sat on her hotel bed, laptop open, writing her official report. Every detail was noted. The initial confrontation, the words used, the nonverbal cues, the escalation, the intervention by the FBI, the reactions of passengers and crew. She included her recommendations for future incidents, cross-agency briefings, ID protocols, and real-world bias training. She ended with a simple line, "Incidents like this compromise more than missions. They erode public trust." In Washington, Agent Stone presented Zara's report to a room full of senior officials. She highlighted the recommendations, arguing for sweeping changes. Security must not come at the expense of civil rights. We cannot afford to lose talented operatives to bureaucratic missteps or bias. The director listened, nodding. "Draft the new protocol. I want results." Word reached the airline's boardroom. An emergency meeting convened, attended by legal, public relations, and operations. Beverly Thompson pushed for a public apology. The CEO, wary of liability, agreed only to acknowledge passenger concerns and announce reforms. Meanwhile, Amanda Washington's story hit the national news cycle. She described the O'Hare incident as a case study in the limits of training and the dangers of assumption. She quoted passengers like Tyrone, experts like Jonathan Davis, and sources within the FBI, piecing together a narrative that was both fair and unflinching. The public response was swift. Protests grew at airports nationwide. Lawmakers called for hearings. A viral petition demanded legislation mandating bias training for all airline and airport personnel. Zara watched the coverage from her hotel room, her face illuminated by the glow of her laptop. She answered a secure call from her handler. "You're a symbol now," he said. "We'll need to rotate you off this assignment soon." "I understand. Mission is nearly complete. Be careful. There are threats and there are opportunities. You're now both." Zara ended the call, packed her files, and prepared for another day in the city. In Chicago, Chief Marcus Davis met with Officer Parker. She shared her concerns about bias and protocol. He listened carefully, then promised to schedule more in-depth training for the department. "That incident is a turning point," he told her. "If we can learn from it, maybe we can prevent the next one." At the airline, Jessica and Brian completed their training. The experience left them shaken. Jessica began to recognize the gaps in her own thinking, the ways fear and unfamiliarity could cloud judgment. Brian, less willing to admit fault, nonetheless found himself hesitating the next time a passenger's behavior felt off. Dorothy, for her part, became a quiet advocate among the crew, sharing her experiences and reminding colleagues that kindness was often the best first response. Zara completed her assignment in Los Angeles, delivering critical information that would protect national interests. The satisfaction of a job well done mingled with the persistent ache of unwanted notoriety. On her last day in the city, she met Tyrone for coffee. He slid into the seat across from her, a warm smile on his face. "How's the world treating you?" Zara smiled. "Busier than usual." He handed her a news clipping. "You made a difference, you know. They're changing the rules." She read the article quietly, nodding. "One incident doesn't fix everything, but it's a start." He leaned in, voice low. "Some of us will keep pushing. We're not letting it go." Zara finished her coffee, grateful for his solidarity. "Thank you for having my back. That matters more than you know." They parted with a handshake, the kind that seals a promise. Back in her hotel, Zara reviewed her travel plans. She would take a different route home, change her appearance slightly, avoid airports where her face might still be remembered. She left the city as quietly as she had entered it, carrying with her the knowledge that her ordeal had sparked something larger, a reevaluation of procedures, a reconsideration of what safety means, a conversation about the price of suspicion. In Chicago, at the next police roll call, Officer Parker shared her thoughts with her colleagues. "We have to do better. We have to look at our own blind spots." Some nodded, others rolled their eyes. Change, she knew, would not come overnight. At the airline, Beverly Thompson finalized plans for a passenger ombudsman, someone who would field complaints of bias and recommend changes. The new hire was a woman with deep experience in both aviation and civil rights. Agent Stone submitted her final recommendations, now headed for review by top federal officials. Across America, travelers debated, crew members reflected, officials rewrote policies. In airport terminals and government offices, the conversation Zara had forced was only beginning. The story faded from the headlines, replaced by newer outrages, but the reforms remained. Months later, new trainees in airline uniforms sat in small groups, discussing case studies and practicing de-escalation with role-play scenarios. In police academies, instructors lectured about implicit bias, using the O'Hare incident as an example of what could go wrong and how to fix it. In Washington, senior officials signed off on new ID protocols for federal agents traveling undercover, designed to minimize public confrontations without compromising security. And in hotel rooms across the country, operatives like Zara read the new guidelines, grateful for the extra layer of protection, wary of the dangers that still lurked. The ripple effects of that single night in Chicago would be felt for years, sometimes as policy, sometimes as a quiet conversation, sometimes as a moment of hesitation that changed the outcome of an ordinary day. Zara, back at headquarters, finished her final report. Her supervisor read it in silence, then nodded. "You handled yourself well." She looked out the window. The city spread below her, the world both smaller and larger than before. "Thank you," she said, "but there's still more to do." Amanda Washington stared at her laptop long past midnight, the white light catching in her glasses. Her office was a chaos of paper, coffee cups, notepads, and news clippings, but her mind was sharply ordered. She'd covered protests, city hall scandals, labor strikes. What had begun as a report on airline profiling now stretched into something larger: federal intervention, secrecy, the strange silence surrounding the passenger at O'Hare. She watched again the cell phone video, low-res but powerful, that a college student had posted the night of the flight. The image shook as voices clashed, but Amanda paused at a single frame: Zara Williams, standing steady in a row of blue uniforms and navy blazers, her face unreadable. Amanda rewound, noting every word: the hush when Zara requested the FBI, the passengers who nodded quietly in support, the ones who frowned and looked away. Amanda dialed Tyrone Johnson again, needing one more detail. "You said she never raised her voice?" Amanda pressed, fingers poised over the keyboard. "Never," Tyrone replied, the exhaustion in his voice layered with something like pride. "She was always respectful, She even asked for proper protocol, not special treatment. But I saw how they looked at her. I've seen that look my whole life. Amanda nodded to herself, taking notes. And when she left the plane, Tyrone hesitated. She told me it was just a misunderstanding, but you could tell she'd been through it before. Amanda's article was already shaping itself, a story about more than one night's delay, a story about why calmness in the wrong skin could be read as a threat, a story about how even power can become invisible when filtered through suspicion. Across the country, Zara moved through the day with the same deliberate care she brought to every assignment. At breakfast, the lobby television ran footage of O'Hare protesters, followed by a panel debate on morning cable news. The words racial profiling, airport security, and federal investigation flashed in quick succession. She finished her coffee, checked her messages, and walked to her contact meeting in Koreatown. She'd changed her route 3 times, eyes alert for followers. Every reflective surface caught her gaze. Each time she passed a newspaper stand, she noted how the headlines changed. Some blamed the airline, others the police, but a growing number questioned the secrecy. Who was the woman? What was in the bag? Her contact, a financial analyst, handed her a slim manila folder beneath the table. Thought you'd like to know? Everyone's talking about you at the firm. They say you're some kind of government agent. Zara smiled thinly. Rumors are faster than planes. He slid the folder across. You going to tell your side of the story? She shook her head. Not my job. I just do the work. As she left, her phone buzzed with a new message from Agent Stone. Request for controlled disclosure. HQ wants your input. Back in Washington, the FBI conference room was tense. Director Patricia Hayes, a woman known for her measured authority, sat at the head of the table. Senior staff, public affairs, legal, and security experts filled every chair. The O'Hare incident had become more than a news cycle headache. It was threatening to unravel sensitive operational networks. A single passenger, now a symbol on both cable news and activist hashtags, was the subject of a dozen internal briefings. Agent Stone spoke calmly but firmly. The operative's identity is at risk. The media is close. Social justice groups are demanding answers. Our standard denials won't hold much longer. The director steepled her fingers. If we confirm government employment, we put every undercover traveler at risk. If we keep denying, the pressure escalates. The airline is facing lawsuits. Every agency with field personnel wants guidance. Public Affairs offered a cautious plan. We can acknowledge she was cleared by federal authorities without specifying her role. We emphasize that standard security was followed and that protocols are under review. Legal frowned. If we admit she was an operative, we admit failure in our own field procedures. Congress will call hearings. Stone pushed back. If we don't, we leave her alone to carry the consequences. She's become a symbol against her will. We owe her more. The director closed her eyes, weighing options. Draft both statements. Prepare to pivot. If her mission is at risk, we pull her out. Stone nodded. She won't want to abandon the assignment. In Chicago, Chief Marcus Davis reviewed a spreadsheet of all security incidents over the last 5 years. The O'Hare situation was not the first to raise questions, just the loudest. His screen was filled with patterns, passengers described as unusually calm, not reacting as expected, questioning authority. Black and brown travelers, especially women, appeared disproportionately in those notes. He scrawled a margin note. Is calm only suspicious on some bodies? He called Officer Parker into his office. She sat, hat in her lap, eyes steady but wary. Lisa, you raised good points at roll call. I need to hear them again, with detail. She drew a deep breath. When we boarded that plane, I was ready to see her as a problem. She didn't resist. She didn't argue. But I was already thinking, this is another case of non-compliance. I see it now. Her calm was proof to me, not evidence against. That's on me. And the training didn't help. It just taught us what to fear, not what to look for. Marcus wrote as she spoke. What do you want from us? More time to assess before we escalate, and training that isn't just checking boxes. Can you help design it? She nodded, the beginnings of hope in her face. In the airline's legal department, Beverly Thompson pored over draft statements. Customer complaints flooded her inbox, each one more heated than the last. Advocacy groups demanded more than apologies. One email from a frequent flyer cut through the noise. "I saw your crew profile and humiliate a black woman who stayed calm through it all. If you want my business, fix your culture." She forwarded the email to the CEO. "This is what we're up against, not just lawsuits, but trust." In Los Angeles, Zara continued her assignment. Each day brought a new risk: the risk of recognition, the risk of surveillance, the risk that her own agency would decide the mission was too hot and pull her out. But she persisted. At business conferences, her handshake was firm, her smile polite, her credentials checked and rechecked by wary hosts. During a meeting, her contact passed a folded newspaper across the table, an editorial circled in red. The headline read, "When Calmness Becomes Suspicious, the American Security Paradox." The columnist described how black composure could trigger white anxiety, how deference to authority was still interpreted as non-compliance if not accompanied by submission. Zara read the words slowly. She had lived them long before they became headlines. That evening, she checked in with Agent Stone. "If you disclose anything, keep my operational cover intact. I'll handle the rest." Stone's voice was gentle. "Are you sure? The media storm is getting worse." "I'm sure. I'd rather finish the work than explain myself on TV." Back in Chicago, airline management convened a meeting with union representatives. The flight attendants' union demanded better support. "You put our people on the front lines without proper tools. If we're supposed to spot threats, give us real training, but don't hang us out to dry when public opinion turns." The CEO agreed to fund new programs. He called Captain Mitchell for advice. "I've read every word in those manuals," Mitchell said. "They tell us what to do if there's a bomb, a hijacker, a fire. They don't tell us how to judge what's different from what's dangerous. That's the real gap." The CEO nodded. "Will you help us write the new rules?" "Gladly." Amanda Washington's story ran the next morning, front page on her outlet, and quickly syndicated nationwide. The headline was blunt: "Federal Agent Profiled. How Assumption Nearly Compromised National Security." She detailed every step: the initial calmness, the escalation, the bomb squad, the federal clearance, the stonewalling afterward. She quoted passengers, law enforcement, crew, and civil rights experts. The article ended with a question: how many other missions have been compromised? How many other travelers have been humiliated because we train our eyes to look for difference, not danger? Cable news ran panels all day. Advocacy groups seized the moment, launching campaigns for comprehensive reform. Petitions flooded lawmakers' inboxes. At O'Hare, airport staff underwent emergency workshops. In New York, Atlanta, Dallas, and San Francisco, airlines quietly called for crisis meetings with security consultants. Tyrone Johnson found himself in demand. Civil rights organizations called him to speak at rallies, panels, and legal briefings. His account of what he saw, how quickly suspicion turned to accusation, how rarely anyone asked a clarifying question, became a centerpiece of every presentation. In one interview, he said, "She handled herself better than I could have, but she shouldn't have had to." Officer Parker watched Tyrone on TV, pride and discomfort mingling in her chest. She found herself taking notes on his testimony, highlighting every moment when the narrative could have taken a less harmful turn. Back in Washington, congressional aides drafted questions for hearings. How many operatives had been delayed, exposed, or endangered by airport profiling? Were protocols for federal personnel strong enough? Should airlines be held liable for civil rights violations, or did the burden fall on security agencies? At the FBI, Agent Stone prepared for her own testimony. Her notes included recommendations for universal ID protocols, rapid verification systems, cross-training between agencies, and, most of all, a commitment to equity in every layer of fieldwork. Director Hayes called a private meeting with the heads of major federal departments. The mood was tense. "Our ability to conduct sensitive operations cannot be at the mercy of assumption or bias," Hayes said. "We must change our own culture, not just pass blame." A representative from Homeland Security bristled. We're already overloaded. You want us to add civil rights monitors to every flight? Hayes stared him down. I want you to protect the rights you swore to defend. That means more than fighting threats from outside. The meeting ran late into the night, ending only when a plan emerged. Joint training, rapid communication channels, and an internal review of every airport profiling incident involving federal personnel over the past decade. At the same time, Beverly Thompson at the airline finalized a letter to passengers and staff. The tone was personal, not legalistic. She wrote, "We failed to recognize that our own training could make us blind to the humanity of the people we serve. We are committed to rebuilding trust, starting with listening, learning, and real accountability." She ended with a promise. Every traveler deserves respect. We will do better. The letter went viral, sparking both applause and skepticism. For Zara, the national attention was a double-edged sword. Her contacts in Los Angeles grew more nervous, some canceling meetings out of fear of exposure. Yet she found unexpected allies, business leaders, local activists, even quiet federal colleagues who saw in her experience a validation of their own anxieties. A young analyst approached her after a briefing. "I wanted to thank you. Because of what happened, they're rewriting the protocols. Maybe next time I won't have to worry about what airport security thinks is suspicious." Zara nodded, grateful. Change is slow, but it's possible. Each night she filed encrypted reports to headquarters. Her mission parameters shifted as the media coverage waxed and waned. New orders arrived. Stay in place. Let public pressure do its work. Your example is enough for now. Amanda Washington's second article focused on solutions. She wrote about the need for universal traveler protections, clear and rapid redress processes, anonymous reporting for discrimination, and public accountability. She ended with a call for a new era of security that is as committed to justice as it is to safety. As the week wore on, Congress scheduled hearings on airport discrimination. Tyrone was called to testify, as were Captain Mitchell, Jessica Miller, Officer Parker, Agent Stone, and representatives from advocacy organizations. Zara watched the hearings online, listening as each witness described the choices, the assumptions, the systems that had failed and the ones that had held firm. Some admitted fault, some blamed the manuals, some claimed innocence. Tyrone's testimony stood out, clear, compassionate, and determined. They saw a threat where there was none, and if not for her composure, it might have ended much worse. Parker followed, her voice steady. "I'm learning every day how to do better. I hope this is just the start." Captain Mitchell answered a senator's question with a frankness that surprised many. "We need to train our eyes to see evidence, not just difference." Jessica, when pressed, admitted, "I reacted to what I didn't understand. That's not good enough. I'm committed to changing." The hearings ended with a bipartisan call for reform, legislation drafted, and appropriations made for new training and oversight. The days that followed brought quieter victories. Airline crews practiced new protocols, role-playing every variety of passenger interaction. Officers attended mandatory bias and de-escalation workshops. Public awareness campaigns launched, featuring travelers of every background, each declaring, "I belong here." Zara finished her assignment, her cover intact despite the attention. Before departing Los Angeles, she met Tyrone for coffee one last time. "Do you regret how public it became?" he asked. Zara considered the question. "It's not what I wanted, but maybe it's what was needed." He slid a newspaper across the table, her photo circled in red this time, but with a new caption, "Agent for Change." She smiled. "Let's hope so." At O'Hare, Chief Marcus Davis reviewed his final report. He included recommendations from every corner: Parker's push for practical, lived experience training, Beverly's call for transparency, Dorothy's reminder that kindness should never be out of policy. In Washington, Director Hayes reviewed Agent Stone's full report and signed off on a new cross-agency protocol. In a message to all staff, she wrote, "The power to change is always within our grasp. We must never confuse vigilance with suspicion or authority with justice." A month later, Amanda Washington visited O'Hare, walking the concourses with a notebook. She spoke with travelers, crew, and officers, documenting their responses to the changes. Many had noticed friendlier greetings, more patient explanations, fewer confrontations. One traveler told her, "I still get nervous at security, but I feel like they're actually seeing me now, not just a stereotype." Amanda smiled, scribbling down the words. When she returned to her office, she filed her final story in the series. She ended it simply, "Change, like trust, is earned moment by moment." As autumn settled over Chicago, Zara received a commendation for her work, both operational and unintended. Her supervisor handed her a folder. "You set things in motion. You didn't ask for it, but you owned it." She nodded, accepting the folder. If it helped someone else, it was worth it. A week later, she boarded another flight, her paperwork in order, her credentials newly updated according to the protocols she helped create. The attendant greeted her with a smile that felt genuine. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Williams." This time her calm was met with respect, and across the country, in airports and agencies and neighborhoods, the ripple effects continued. Quiet, persistent, undeniable. 6 months after that stormy night at O'Hare, winter's chill settled over Chicago. Travelers hurried through the airport's glass atriums, bundled in coats and lost in their own itineraries, never realizing they walked through the center of a story that had changed the industry. The incident had faded from headlines, but the changes it set in motion rippled out, reshaping the daily reality for millions. The terminal hummed as always. Now, new posters lined the walls. "Travel with dignity, your rights matter." Security checkpoints posted cards in several languages explaining passenger protections. Airline crews wore badges that read, "Trained for Fairness," and an ombudsman desk near the main security entrance fielded questions and complaints with patience that had once been rare. At the airport administration offices, Chief Marcus Davis looked out at the tarmac, reviewing the year's final report. His desk bore a small, framed news clipping, a photo of activists outside O'Hare holding signs, a handwritten note from Officer Lisa Parker, "Thank you for listening. Still learning." The department's new training manual, thick with input from Parker and outside advocates, now formed the backbone of their onboarding process. Parker herself was no longer a rookie. Her days started early and ran late, filled with coaching sessions, officer check-ins, and community meetings. The department had made her the first liaison for bias review, her own journey part of every workshop. She still replayed that night sometimes, her assumptions, the knot in her stomach, the quiet pride she felt every time another officer opened up about their blind spots. She knew change was slow, but she saw it in small ways. Colleagues pausing before they escalated, supervisors asking more questions, rookie officers less certain of the old stories about who looked suspicious. One morning, as Parker finished leading a new class through the implicit bias modules, she noticed a familiar face in the back row. Tyrone Johnson, in a crisp suit, nodded at her and waited for the room to empty. She smiled, gesturing him over. He handed her a pamphlet for a legal workshop he was organizing, "Know Your Rights, Navigating Modern Security." His civil rights firm had expanded since the incident, partnering with airports to educate travelers and staff. They'd held town halls across the Midwest, amplifying stories like Zara's and pushing for stronger federal oversight. "I tell every new attorney," Tyrone said, "that what happens in one moment can last for years. The law is only part of it. It's what people choose to remember and what they won't let slide back into silence." Parker nodded. People listen more now, not everyone, but enough to start something real. They talked for a while, sharing stories about slow progress, an officer who changed her mind in a tense confrontation, a passenger who filed a complaint and received a respectful reply instead of a brush-off. Each victory was measured in inches, not miles, but they both agreed that what mattered most was that people kept pushing. Later that week, Parker stopped by the ombudsman's desk. The ombudsman, a former flight attendant named Dorothy, had become a fixture at the airport, a friendly but relentless presence. She greeted Parker with a quick hug. "Never thought I'd be working here full-time." Dorothy said, gesturing to a wall of thank you notes and printed emails. But you'd be surprised how many people just want someone to listen. Most problems start when people feel invisible. Parker smiled. That's what the new training says too. Dorothy showed her the latest feedback forms. More positive than negative, more suggestions for improvement than angry rants. We still get complaints, but fewer about feeling targeted or ignored. More about the food and flight delays, honestly. Progress, Parker said, and they both laughed. Meanwhile, the airline's board of directors gathered for a quarterly update. Beverly Thompson, now promoted to chief customer officer, led the presentation. Charts showed a decline in discrimination complaints, an uptick in customer satisfaction, and a record number of crew attending voluntary fairness workshops. One director raised an eyebrow. How much has all this cost? Beverly didn't flinch. Less than a lawsuit, and less than the cost of lost trust. She pointed to a testimonial from a frequent flyer who had once threatened to boycott the airline but now praised a crew member for patient, respectful service during a delay. This isn't about PR, it's about credibility. Our passengers are watching, and so is the government. The director relented. Carry on. After the meeting, Beverly walked through the airport, watching crews interact with passengers. She saw Jessica Miller, more confident now, chatting with a nervous family at the gate. Jessica's own journey had been rough. At first defensive, then uncertain, and finally open to learning. She had attended every extra workshop, volunteered for role plays, and even mentored new recruits. The O'Hare incident had shaken her, but she'd let it shape her into a leader for change. Brian Carter took longer. He'd spent months bristling at feedback, but the testimony he'd heard in Congress and the personal stories from passengers started to sink in. He now taught a segment of the training, focusing on what professional skepticism should really look like. On the other side of the country, Zara Williams stood in the corner of a bustling government office, waiting for her final debrief. The walls were lined with world clocks, the air full of the quiet intensity unique to people accustomed to handling crisis. She'd been back in D.C. for 3 months, her mission in Los Angeles completed, her field assignments rotated, her story filtered through layers of operational security. Her debrief was conducted by a senior intelligence officer with a reputation for seeing beyond the paperwork. He reviewed the final report, nodding occasionally. You handled yourself under scrutiny, protected the mission and the agency, he said, tapping a paragraph that described her choices in those tense moments at O'Hare. What did you learn? Zara took a moment, collecting her thoughts. Procedures only go so far. Systems bend under pressure. Biases survive, even in institutions built on discipline. But the right response, calm, facts, dignity, can keep things from spiraling. Still, it shouldn't fall on the person being questioned to fix the system. The officer nodded. Your story is being used in new training across multiple agencies. It's become a cautionary tale and a guide. Zara met his gaze. I hope it helps someone else stay safe and gets people thinking before they act. He closed the file. It already has. You're cleared for your next assignment, but with new protocols in place. Your documentation is now coded for instant verification, less chance for a repeat. Zara accepted the new identification card, feeling the weight and relief in equal measure. Later that week, she met with Agent Rebecca Stone over coffee. Stone, now promoted to a cross-agency role, updated her on the reforms. Universal rapid verification for traveling federal personnel, new protocols for interagency communication, joint workshops with local law enforcement, and more. Change is slow, but we're seeing it, Stone said. Law enforcement is reporting fewer incidents of unnecessary escalation. Airline complaints are down. Still, there's pushback in some places. There always is, Zara replied. But if you make it part of the system, people have to reckon with it. Stone smiled. You're something of a legend now, you know. Instructors say, remember O'Hare. Even new agents know your story. Zara shrugged, almost shy. I'd rather be known for my work. But if my story helps, I'm glad. The conversation shifted to old friends, new missions, the latest politics. Stone finished her coffee, then paused. "If you ever want to come off the front line, let me know. There are people who could use your perspective." Zara considered it. "Maybe someday, but for now there's more to do." They hugged goodbye, a rare gesture in a world of guarded distance. That spring, Congress passed legislation requiring all major airports to implement bias recognition and de-escalation programs. Airport police, security screeners, and airline crews attended regular workshops, watched testimonies, and even role-played situations drawn directly from Zara's experience. Civil rights organizations, emboldened by the publicity and the reforms, formed a coalition to monitor compliance. They collected stories, tracked statistics, and continued to lobby for broader systemic changes. Tyrone testified before a Senate committee, his calm presence and eloquence making a strong impression. "True security comes from trust and fairness," he said. "We need both, not just one or the other." His testimony was replayed on news broadcasts, clips used in advocacy campaigns. He returned home to letters from students, travelers, and activists thanking him for his candor. Lisa Parker was invited to speak at a national law enforcement conference. Her topic, "Learning from Mistakes, a Path to Better Policing." She described her journey from assumption to accountability, offering practical steps for building trust. After her speech, several officers approached her. Some admitted they hadn't thought much about bias before. Others said her story made them rethink how they approached difficult calls. Dorothy expanded the Ombudsman's office, hiring a diverse team of staff. They created a hotline, partnered with advocacy groups, and launched an online portal for travelers to report issues and suggest improvements. Feedback was reviewed monthly and sent directly to top management and federal regulators. Travelers began to notice subtle changes, friendlier greetings, more patient explanations, less tension at checkpoints. Families traveling with children, elders, and those with visible differences reported better treatment. Social media posts shifted from angry rants to cautious optimism. Beverly Thompson's customer service division received an award from a major travel association. She used her acceptance speech to remind the industry that policy only works when it becomes habit, when it's lived every day by every employee. Zara's new assignments took her to other cities and countries. She continued her intelligence work, her cover story now a little more complicated. The agency's rapid verification system meant her travels drew less attention, and her name faded from the national conversation. But every so often, she'd catch a reference, a new agent mentioning the O'Hare case, a trainer quoting her advice, a civil rights lawyer referencing her composure in a difficult moment. She wrote a letter to her younger self, sealing it in her files. "Never let someone else's fear decide your value. Calm is not a threat. You know who you are, and that's enough." A year after the incident, O'Hare held a community forum in the main terminal. Airport officials, police, crew, advocates, and frequent travelers gathered to reflect on what had changed. Tyrone led a panel with Dorothy, Parker, Beverly, and a new class of recruits. Zara, traveling through on her way to a briefing, paused at the edge of the crowd, listening. She heard Parker's story about challenging her own assumptions. She watched Dorothy field questions from travelers about their rights. She heard Beverly promise continued transparency. Tyrone, closing the forum, looked out at the gathered crowd. Progress is a relay, not a sprint. Everyone has to carry the baton a little further. That's how change happens. As the forum ended, Zara moved quietly toward her gate, slipping back into anonymity. A security officer greeted her with a nod. No suspicion, only professionalism. Her boarding pass scanned without delay. No one questioned the weight of her bag. She sat by the window, looking out at the planes taking off into the gray Chicago sky. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message. "Assignment confirmed. Good luck." She smiled, thinking of all the invisible changes that now protected travelers, agents, and crew alike. The old fears remained, but so did new habits, ones born of listening, humility, and courage. As her flight lifted off, Zara gazed down at the city, feeling the satisfaction of work well done. She knew her story was just one thread in a much larger tapestry, a reminder that every moment of courage, public or private, could nudge the world toward something better. The reforms continued, the lessons spread, and for thousands of travelers each day, the air felt just a little bit freer.